Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Collin Holmes. He's the founder and CEO at Chatmeter. Collin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you're doing at Chatmeter is actually quite fascinating, and you've been around for close to 10 years now. So I'm very curious to hear a bunch of kind of advice and things in your journey. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, maybe let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up out of the San Francisco Bay Area. Was born in San Jose, but actually I consider most of my growing up in Pleasanton, which is in the East Bay.
Nice area.
I lived there from about 10 to 20 or so, and then kind of migrated south from there to go to UC Riverside, then down to San Diego. I've been in San Diego here for the last kind of 20 years. So
nice.
This is my home now.
Nice. So what did you take in university and why?
So here's a really interesting story. So prior to my transfer, I was actually in my junior college, I was actually an art major, technically photography.
Okay.
So I studied photography. This is a funny story, but I wanted to get a job in photography. So this is again like 20 years plus years ago. Sure. I got a job at one of those glamour shots places, if you remember those at all.
Yeah, totally. Interesting.
So
How was that?
I was a photographer there, and it was one of the actual, I always date myself with all my stories, but one of the first places where you could actually see your photography right away. They actually had digital images that you could see right after the photo shoot. And so as a photographer there, he was also a salesperson. So he would take the pictures and then sell them the product, and I did very well there. And so I got promoted up to be a to be a store manager. I think it was 19 years old, and I was the youngest store manager ever at their existence, and took over this store. It was losing money, and the only way I was going to get paid is if I turned the store around. It was actually a large component of my pay was out of the profit and loss. So I essentially was running the store like it was running the business. And it was that exposure. I kind of finished up my junior college, and so I had a good year of running the business on a full-time basis, and realized not only was I good at it, but I was very interested and excited about the whole concept. And so it was that experience actually that made me change my major before going to UC Riverside from photography to business.
Okay. No, interesting. That makes some sense. And then you ended up going and getting your MBA, correct?
Yeah, it was quite a few years later. So essentially after I went to UC Riverside, finished up there in a couple of years, and then came to San Diego. After that, I worked at a couple ad agencies here locally. So I was basically studied marketing, worked at some ad agencies, and then around 98, 99, when the dot-com boom was happening, I wanted to get into the internet startup scene. And so I started at a company called Interview here in San Diego. Interview was pioneering streaming media. So people are on dial-up connections.
Sure.
So we're still streaming, we're streaming House of Blues concerts, MTV videos.
Very cool.
Privately about half the porn on the web. Of course, that's where the innovation is of any technology and revenue and all that stuff. But the company grew. I mean, it was one of those big success stories, right? They grew to about 200 to 300 employees. We sold to a company called Akamai at the peak of the market for $3.2 billion with a B.
Wow.
So it was one of those exciting times. There's a new car in the parking lot every week and all that fun stuff. unfortunately, it was probably the worst acquisition ever on paper because, one, a lot of the paper was made up. If you remember back in the day,
Yeah.
a lot of cooking in the books, but in addition, the dot bomb it happened within about probably 6 or 8 months of that acquisition.
Interesting.
So I didn't have a huge financial exit. I hadn't been there that long. And so I didn't have a huge financial exit, but it got me excited about startups in the tech space and what can happen if you're in the right place and right time and make the right decisions.
Sure.
But getting to my MBA, one of the reasons I got my MBA is when I was at interview, I was growing and growing in terms of career. I kept getting promoted, but I could never get promoted to a director level because they all said, everybody at director level and above has an MBA here. And so I hit a bit of I guess you could say, a glass ceiling and recognized that I wanted to go back. I should go back and get my MBA, especially because the major recession just hit. And there were no marketing jobs anymore. So I actually went back, got my MBA. I got a gig at AT&T Wireless, actually selling BlackBerries.
Interesting.
So this is back in the BlackBerry days, selling BlackBerry enterprise servers. So it was an enterprise sales gig, which was good because it gave me, as a marketer, I think it's very valuable to actually have sales experience.
Oh, totally.
Going out and doing, 60, 70 sales calls a day and all those challenges with carrying a quota, and all the stress that goes along with that, is quite an eye opener when you're a marketer and you're just kind of creating messaging and creating content and you're not really feeling the pain of what it's like to actually convince a customer to sign up.
Yeah, very much so. So walk me through the rest of your kind of career and how did you come up with the idea of ChatMeter and what exactly is it?
Sure. Yeah. So as I was essentially studying marketing in my MBA, at the end of that tail, it was about 2 years to finish my MBA. I was just required to do a thesis project, and so I picked a startup in town called V-Enable. This was in San Diego, and V-Enable actually stood for Voice Enable. So I started working on a project. I finished my MBA, and they gave me a full-time job offer. So I moved. I quit my job at AT&T Wireless. I moved over to V-Enable and headed up their product development and marketing for the company. And it was, the product actually, essentially, the company when I first started was pioneering voice search. So voice search
early
back on the flip phone days, right? This is like 14, 15 years ago. And at the time, in terms of wireless data services, people were only downloading ringtones.
Yeah.
So when I first started there, we were doing voice search for ringtones, which was crazy. You could say Britney Spears or whatever, and it would do a search and come back with your Britney Spears ringtones.
Interesting.
But we realized pretty quickly, one, the ringtone space was changing dynamically in terms of going from ringtones to full, song ringtones or whatever, and that cut out the middleman and all this other stuff. So we had to do our own pivot. And so we decided to pivot into local search.
Okay.
So we pivoted the company mostly because voice search for local made a lot of sense, right? You're on the go. Mm-hmm. You don't want to type. It's an older demographic because, local search should hit everybody.
Sure.
So they're more likely to say something rather than type something in. And so, it was pretty hilarious. We had, just like you can do on your phone today, this is, again, 14 years ago on a flip phone, you could say Starbucks. We would record that search. We would send that off to a server to do voice recognition processing. We would then take that and send it to another server to go and get the local search results.
Wow.
Finally, within about 14 or 15 seconds, you would see the Starbucks on a map on your little flip phone.
Which was
pretty hilarious to think about compared to today.
Right? That was pretty fast back in the day.
So it's funny you mentioned that because when I tell this story, I often think about a party that we threw. We had a huge celebration when we broke what we called the 10-second barrier.
Sure, I can imagine.
So
Yeah.
we got it below 10 seconds. We thought that was amazing. But the challenge was, flip phones were not still, it was limited in terms of data services and data adoption. We had a white label strategy, so we were, powering up, local search for Verizon and AT&T, and they would preload it on the device.
Interesting.
So we were doing well and generating, good revenues. Around 2008, the iPhone comes out, which is good for us because obviously smartphones are going to power data services and data adoption.
Yep.
In local search. The problem for that business, though, was our white label business model, right? So no one's going to care about a Verizon local search app.
Right.
They're just going to use what's evolved, right? Google Maps at the time was Foursquare was big.
Yeah.
They're going to use whatever, app they prefer, and no one's going to care about that. So the company actually pivoted again. This is around 2009. I'd been there for, I think, 4 or 5 years. I was vice president of product development and marketing. They decided they were going to move to the Bay Area, raise some more money, do a pivot, and go into mobile advertising. And I'd been through obviously 2 or 3 pivots with them already.
Sure.
Said, I'm good. I'm going to stay here in San Diego and open up my own gig. When I was there as vice president, I was involved in board meetings and raising capital and all those things. So that really was the business in the startup that gave me the confidence to go out and do my own thing.
Interesting.
And being a local search, I recognized, at the time, local search had less than, probably around 5% adoption in mobile local search.
Sure.
But with smartphones, I anticipated that was going to change or forecasted it. So I knew there was a new marketing channel that was essentially emerging, right?
Okay.
So this was going to be important for customers with physical locations. This is going to be the key way in which customers are discovering, their business and finding out about it and deciding if I'm going to go here or there. And that reviews were going to have a huge impact on that, just like reviews did in the online space and e-commerce, with Amazon and others. I was anticipating that reviews would have a huge impact on local search. And so I came up with the concept of Chatmeter.
Okay.
Brainstormed the name out of nowhere. I think I was looking at different things like Buzz and BuzzMeter and others, right. But was focused on making sure I could get the .com as well.
Yeah.
So
Fair enough.
That's a key ingredient. So came up with a name. It was a little off on the target market originally. So this is right around, by the way, by end of 2009, I started fiddling around with the idea and the business plan and all that.
Okay.
And at the time, people were all talking about, at least in the .com tech space, we're talking about freemium. So freemium was a big area of, or big business model that people were pushing. So I built a freemium to small business offering, which is essentially the same thing that we do today around kind of, local SEO and reputation platform. Just it was designed for small businesses. So imagine, we're having mom and pop restaurant owners sign up on our website. They would get a simple PDF report. It would show them here's how you're doing in terms of reviews and what customers are saying and how that compares with your competitors down the street. Here's how, if your business listings are accurate and all the kind of the components that go into local search and reputation, and then get them to try and move to a dashboard as a full service paid offering.
Right.
So it's kind of the freemium upsell. Banged my head against that wall for about 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Interesting.
The challenge with, it's a challenging thing for many entrepreneurs because people get very excited about the idea that there's about 30 million small businesses out there. So They think about, if I can get, 1-2% adoption, I'm going to have an amazing company and make a ton of money. But getting to that point is incredibly difficult. And the reasons why that I learned the hard way, SMB owners are knowledge starved, especially within tech, right?
Sure. Yeah, very much so.
They are, money starved, right? They don't
Yeah.
have huge marketing budgets. They are time starved. You know, they're working 70, 80 hours a week already. They typically don't have a lot of time to deal with this stuff. And then they have their own churn problem. So if you look at about a third, it's pretty amazing to think about this volume. There's 30 million SMBs out there. A third of them go out of business every year.
Interesting.
And a third open up every year.
Interesting.
So if you're starting to build a recurring revenue model or SaaS model on top of something, you know, churn is a very important issue. So if you have high churn, you're always just replacing your revenue, right? So it's really hard to outpace if you have a churn problem. And if you're building on top of a market in which you already have a 30% churn with their own business, it makes it even more difficult to make sure you have strong retention rates. So needless to say, after doing that I think I launched in 2010 to about 2013, you know, it was pretty tough going. It was very, you know, I was a bootstrapping the business with very little funding. I basically took my entire life savings that I had saved up, including my 401k, which I don't recommend selling, but I did have to sell that as well and put every dime I had into the business for the first few years. I had done, you know, mostly software development is all done with India outsourcing.
Got you.
In my previous company, we were using India software developers, so I was pretty familiar with building requirements and actually getting good product out of it if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, that's a big lesson learned that I hear from a lot of other entrepreneurs. Like, if you send over your concept and requirements and hope in 6 months you're going to get a great product back, unless you babysit that every day, that's not what's going to happen, right? There's going to be miscommunication and all those other elements. So that was, you know, one of the other big challenges is, you know, as I was bootstrapping this business, I was typically working 80 to 90 hours a week, and often up till 3, 4, or 5 a.m. in the morning because I was talking with India.
Sure. Wow.
So incredibly difficult. Certainly the hardest thing I ever did. Put all my life savings into it. Within probably 2 to 3 years, I had, you know, run dry. I was broke.
Wow.
Went out and did a little friends and family round. So, you know, tried to tap a little bit of that. That helped us survive for probably another like 6 or 8 months.
Wow.
And then it was a big decision time, right? Now, what am I going to do next? I knew I wanted to pivot toward enterprise and kind of pivot the business toward multiple locations. But we're running low on funding. You know, revenues were coming in, but not nearly as much to really kind of grow the business. We had gotten into one of the big incubators here in San Diego. So over the first couple of years, I started working with some advisors. And those advisors had got us into got me into one incubator in town. That incubator helped us get introduction to some angel investors. And that was really when I, you know, started talking to angel investors and raised our first little angel round, which frankly was tiny. I think our first angel round was $45,000.
Sure.
Couple checks from a couple of wealthy individuals.
Got you.
But what that did is two major things. One, and one of those angel investors actually introduced me to my current CTO, Paul Koch.
Okay.
It was an amazing addition to the company. You know, prior to that, I had, you know, some kind of more contractor engineers that were helping us, and obviously a lot of India development.
Right.
He came in and saw there was a huge opportunity to build a real product here. He recognized we were pivoting toward enterprise. So there's a lot we were going to have to build, and saw, you know, great opportunity. So he took a massive, you know, pay cut to come work for us.
Interesting.
In addition, I also found my current head of sales, who I actually found through a job ad on Craigslist, as we were looking for a salesperson.
Wow.
And he came in and has also been really a game changer on the sales side. Again, pivoting toward multiple location, we had to figure out, you know, how we're going to sell, what the sales mix is going to be, what the message is going to be, what that PowerPoint deck is, like all those components to kind of change the model and find a solution that would work and that would scale. So both those guys have been a tremendous addition to the company. We relaunched in January of 2015
Okay.
with this new enterprise product. Enterprise, again, meaning multiple locations. So instead of a small business, now, we require you must have at least 20 locations for us to even talk to you. Our typical client has about 50 to 500 locations.
Gotcha.
But essentially, we relaunched that product offering in January of 2015, and the company has just skyrocketed ever since then. So
Nice.
we just hit we were in the top Fortune 1000. We had a 750% revenue growth since 2015.
Wow, congrats, man. That's huge.
And so really exciting. We actually just hit the top 10 of the fastest growing SaaS companies in the world as well.
Wow.
So the business has been growing like crazy, and it's been a fun and exciting ride. We're up to about 80 employees here in San Diego, and just doing really well.
Congrats, man, on all that. That's great. So an overnight 10-year success, right? That's how it's described?
I call it a 5-year overnight success is what I would say. But yeah, the first 5 years are pretty rough.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think that's the funny thing about the whole space, right? Is so many people think that you just put up a website or your little SaaS app and you're going to make a pile of money, right? Well, it takes years, right? So
yeah,
I'm curious.
I mean, most VCs, they say now the average business, most VCs will say the average time it takes to build a business is about 10 years. So it's not the world, back when it was 2000 or 2001, everybody was, they would build a business and they would flip it in a couple of years, and they were selling it for crazy amounts of money. That's not happening anymore, right? The whole world has become more realistic that you have to go out, you have to acquire customers, and that's a very difficult process. Anyone can build anything, in my opinion. So that's the world of software today. Like anyone with the right amount of money can build anything. That's not the hard part. The hard part is acquiring and retaining customers.
Yeah.
That's where the challenge comes in.
Makes sense. So walk me through the platform a bit. How do these organizations use the platform, and what types of features and kind of functionality do you guys offer?
Yeah. So what Chatmeter is essentially a local SEO and local search and reputation platform for multiple locations. So imagine a chain, for example, like we just closed Payless recently, right? Payless has 2,800 stores. They utilize our platform for a couple things. One is responding to all the reviews that come in on those local search sites. So when people are posting reviews on Google Maps, on Yelp, and other platforms, Facebook, etc., we pull all that data into our dashboard. We send them live email alerts. So on a daily basis, they understand what the customers are saying in terms of that customer experience. They can utilize our dashboard to respond.
Okay.
And the other elements, we pull in all of their kind of social data as well. So anything around Facebook and Twitter, we're doing social listening. We also have now added media and image monitoring. So that really has become the reviews of today. People are posting pictures, if it's a restaurant or in their experiences, or if it's their new kicks. That's an outdated term, I think. But if it's their new kicks on Payless, they might be posting those on Instagrams. We pull all that information in. But you get the idea. So it's monitoring that information, and then we also take all of that content through we have what's called a sentiment analysis engine. So it may be looking at the thousands of reviews across Payless or one of our restaurant clients like Chili's, and understanding what the customers are essentially saying across all this reviews. Where do you need to improve? If it's Chili's, for example, in the Southwest region, is it wait times? Is it food quality? Is it the waiters? Do you need to fire the store manager? Like those types of elements that help them to improve the customer experience. So that's why I think that's one of the main reasons why our retention rate is really high, because it's not only utilized by marketing in terms of the presence, but it's also used by operations in terms of improving the customer experience. and regional managers who can monitor their stores and see which ones are doing well, which ones are not. And again, if they have to go fire the store manager, so you get the concept there. At the end of the day, by doing all of these things, by responding to reviews, we also help them clean up their business listings and make sure the name, address, and phone number is correct across the web for all those stores. By doing those things, that does a couple things. One, it helps them increase their rankings.
Sure.
So they're going to get more stores in front of more consumers when that consumer is searching for kids' shoes or restaurants. In the examples I gave, in addition, their listings are enhanced. So they'll typically have photos, right? They'll have descriptions that share what that experience is. So it's more likely that a customer is going to click on that. And what's also exciting is, we power a very, important space for our customers.
Okay.
Because typically when consumers are searching, they're looking to go out and make a purchase. Right? Yeah. We are at that last mile transaction. So if you look at the data, local searches, for every local search, I think 76% of the time customers will go and make a purchase within 24 hours.
Interesting.
So by playing in that space and influencing that space, we have a very powerful play and a tremendous ROI for our clients as well.
Interesting. The one thing that I want to get a little bit more information about that we haven't covered yet is your competitor monitoring. How do you do that? Because I think that's kind of really fascinating piece of the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So that's one of the most probably important and relevant things that we do for our customers. Because if you imagine, let's say, we work in the automotive space quite a bit too. So imagine you're an automotive dealer and you tell that automotive dealer, hey, you've got a 3.8 rating and say 400 reviews.
Okay.
He's thinking, hey, that's pretty good, right? I'm golden. Like I don't need to worry about anything. But if you then show them that the competitors down the street, the other dealerships down the street have, say, a 4.2 rating and 2,000 reviews, now I have a problem, right? So not only are you driving that, need to want to be the best in your area, that also shows that you're lagging in terms of rankings and in terms of where you're showing up in search results. Sure. Because reviews have a huge impact on that. There's a bunch of elements that goes into the Google Maps algorithm, consistency of your name, address, and phone number for your location. There's a bunch of elements that play into that. The point being is you've got to always outpace your competitor.
Right.
That's how you're going to be number one, and that's how you're going to drive the most customers. And having that insight into what your competitors are doing is incredibly powerful as well.
Yeah, no, that's actually really quite fascinating because you're right. I think even selfishly, I know sometimes if you're looking up a restaurant or a business to go buy something and they have less than like a 4 out of 5 star rating, you think twice about it, right? And then sometimes you might even start reading the reviews because sometimes you get just people that are, jerks about reviews. Like I remember reading a bad review about a hotel and it was the box spring didn't match the mattress. And I kind of thought, really? You gave them a crappy, and why would you even look at that? Yeah. Right? So like stuff like that sometimes, but they were getting a bad rating because of that. And I thought, okay, but it makes you second guess the second you see a bunch of kind of like 1-star reviews or something like that. So that is quite fascinating to me.
Well, it is. I mean, it is interesting because you bring up a common misperception is that we have a lot of clients who, and really a lot of people in the industry who just feel like all the reviews are negative. Yeah. They feel like reviews are just something that are there for people to complain. But when you actually look at it at an aggregate level, the wide majority of reviews are actually positive. Most people like to, if they have a great experience, then they have no problem going on and posting a great experience. So the majority of reviews, if you look at it from an aggregate basis, is close to a 4-star rating today and continues to actually improve over time. Sure. And that's across, I know that data point because we have, about 30 million reviews now on our platform.
Wow.
or in our database, I should say.
So
yeah, so we have a ton of aggregate data of what's going on in the local search space and local search industry across reviews and listings and rankings. It's pretty powerful. We're tracking over about 2 million locations as of today.
wow. So do you guys suggest how to get people to leave more reviews or more positive reviews? Or how does the platform kind of actually help people improve their kind of standing across all the different platforms?
Yeah. So there's multiple ways of doing that. One of which is just even starting to engage with your customers is actually driving reviews. The other is, we see that in our platform. As soon as you start responding, it's actually generating other customers because they start to see that activity going on the page, on your Google Maps page or on a Yelp page,
right?
And start posting because people love, engaging.
Sure.
In addition, as you roll it out as a company, typically they're educating everybody across the company how important reviews are. So at the local level, people start asking for reviews. People are running contests in many cases where, again, if it's Chili's, imagine a Chili's location, the store manager will run a competition to see which waiter can get mentioned the most, in reviews for a month.
Sure.
So they're doing a lot of things of engaging with customers. We hopefully they're not bribing people because that is kind of a no-no in our industry.
Sure.
You do see that in some cases. I'm sure we've all had our, mover ask us or bribe us to get reviews. That's definitely frowned upon in our industry, so we don't recommend that. But really it's about creating awareness and just keeping a focus on it.
Right. Well, the other thing too, and I've seen it even just when you're in like an app store or something or a review, it's people just want a resolution and then they're willing to turn their negative review into a positive review if you rectify their issue, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's really exciting that you can see that right within our platform. So
interesting.
Typically people will engage with that negative review. They'll respond, say, I'd love to resolve your issue. Please call me or contact me at this email address. Because they don't have a way to directly get a hold of that person unless they can try to figure it out from a customer perspective. But in many cases, they'll chat with the customer. Customer will then append the review, update it. We keep all that historical data in our dashboard so you can actually see the customers turning that negative into a positive, and then those are great wins from, the customer care team that's handling all this stuff.
Interesting. That makes sense.
So really exciting to see that as well.
Thanks for listening to Building the Future. This show is heard by more than 1 million people monthly in over 15 markets worldwide, including Silicon Valley. Kevin Horick's guests are leading business owners, successful entrepreneurs, and merchandisers worldwide. Now, your brand has an opportunity to tap into this dedicated and active group of business people who are looking for places to invest and the right opportunities to support. Find out how you can get involved at buildingthefutureshow.com.
So how do you guys decide which new features to roll into the platform? And are you guys constantly adding new platforms, or do you kind of wait till they mature a bit? Like, how do you decide that? Because you could potentially be feature creeping and constantly chasing your tail to add new stuff, right? That may or may not be relevant.
Yeah, it's always an ongoing challenge. We have, a ton of enterprise clients now that are always asking for new features.
Sure,
so
I can imagine.
we have a whole process that we built now for evaluating those features. Our product team will evaluate that, look at how many different customers it would apply to. Does it create revenue for us? Is there new revenue opportunities tied behind those features?
Sure.
There's a whole process we evaluate, and then sometimes it'll get stuck into a queue if that is to get done, and other times we'll have to reject it and give them a reason why. We can't build everything. That's insane. And we also have to think about UI now because we've added so many features. We have about 6 tabs on our dashboard.
Okay.
So from a UI perspective, it can get pretty hairy if you start to build too many features in there. I'm sure you've seen the dashboards that have 20 tabs and then there's like 3
Yep.
layers underneath each tab. Like it just becomes so exhausting. You don't even know how to use it anymore.
Yep.
And so you don't use it.
No,
And
that
so that
makes
it's a
sense.
very careful, it's a big thing we discuss a lot in some of our product meetings,
Sure.
is kind of feature creep and UI and making sure, everything we put in there is vital, and drives usage and value.
Sure. Well, and I also assume because you're dealing with these large brands, sometimes they're willing to throw money at you to make that happen, right? And sometimes that can be very challenging to turn down, right?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it also depends on what stage you're at too, because sometimes
Sure.
you're going to be in a desperate stage where
Yeah.
no matter what, it's early on and you're bootstrapping and you need that money. So you're going to do it anyway. So it's really interesting how that can evolve depending on what stage your company is at. We're at a point now where it's like, we need to only build features that are going to be revenue generating for everyone, right? Across an entire industry, not just for one single client. Now,
Sure.
being an enterprise company, there is some level of development that we set aside, knowing that we're going to have to build different things and some cases, either from a, cost perspective. Great example. We have one client right now, who is asking us to do internationalization. So most of our data right now we collect and the services we provide are all in the US.
Got you.
So we have a customer that wants us to support international clients because they have a lot of chains that are not only in the U.S. but across the world.
Makes sense.
Europe, South America, et cetera. I'm sure you can imagine the brands that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work that we have to be done. So typically we'll look at that from an engagement perspective, and you either do upfront costs or additional kind of revenue requirements.
Right.
So we're happy to build this if within X time period, you're going to add Y revenue.
Got you.
So that's a great way to, because they don't always get that excited about upfront costs, as you can imagine. But by committing to that, because they're going to add on services, it's a way to mitigate your risk, because even if they aren't able to add it, it's a contract minimum. So those are great ways to kind of mitigate the risk and increase your revenue at the same time.
Got you. No, that's interesting because it's such a balancing act, right? And so you've mentioned kind of a handful of industries that you guys work in, but do you want to kind of mention a few more and maybe give some examples of how people use your platform in those industries?
Sure. Let's see. So we talked a little bit about restaurants already, retail. I mean, pretty similar components of people responding to reviews and driving store experiences. Retail is an interesting one because you start to see that shift back to the stores. So years and years ago, all the retailers are like, oh, everything's going to e-commerce. So let's just run all these e-commerce websites, and they pretty much got their ass handed to them by Amazon in the e-commerce space and in other channels. So they're starting to recognize they need to refocus on their stores again and get a store experiences that will be their differentiator, right? That's the only way that they're actually going to compete, because they can't compete on the margin levels and the adoption levels of an Amazon and others. And so that's been really interesting for them to utilize our dashboard and look at things like, for example, Kohl's as a client was looking at the omni-channel experience. So people that would buy online and pick up in store, so they could actually measure those individual clients or customers that were doing what they call BOPUS. So those are good examples of where customers would be utilizing the platform to look at things like retail as an example.
Interesting.
And the store experience. Other examples, we talked about automotive. So the automotive dealers are interesting because it's not only the original shopping experience, but then you have other customer experiences you need to measure in terms of service and support.
Yeah, totally.
So they look at data in different ways, and those customer experiences are measured differently. What else? We do a lot in the apartment space. So customers that are, property managers that are managing properties, are utilizing the platform, and they're obviously looking at, what customers are posting from a living experience, right? Are you repairing their stuff on time? What are the common facilities like? The pool, to keep the hot tub warm, that type of thing. But you get the concept of, people are going to look at, depending on what their service offering is, are going to dive into different details. And through our sentiment analysis tool, they can really create topics among whatever is important to their business. And that's how we've kind of kept an industry agnostic tool, which is probably one of the bigger challenges that most software companies have. How do you serve multiple industries? And, there's challenges because there's people specific in that industry that might build a similar tool. So, entrepreneurs can get pretty focused on a single industry and go down that path, which maybe that is the right decision, and sometimes it's the wrong decision.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious if there's any advice or things that you tell people to maybe do or don't do, because you're obviously not a startup anymore. You've kind of made that transition to a real business that's been around for a decade, and that's a huge accomplishment. So is there any advice you would give people that are, starting out or struggling through kind of the early years or months? What advice do you give to people like that?
Well, a couple things. One, I would say make sure that you go to other, entrepreneurial startup events. I'm sure, almost everybody, depending on what town you're in, obviously, if you're in Toledo, Ohio, that might be more difficult, but
Sure.
Most cities will have other, startup events going on. Get involved because it'll help you better kind of understand the process as you talk to other people that are going through similar experiences. It's also going to help you with relationships because you'll find people that are going to want to join your team and join your goal and vision, and that are trying to get into the startup space or already maybe have startup experience, and they're actually just looking for their next gig or their next fun thing that they want to do. And in those cases, sometimes they may even be coming with capital and have some ability to invest some capital in your business. So try not to go it alone. I would probably say that's something that I struggle with the first couple years. As I was sitting in my second bedroom working 90 hours a week and trying to figure out where this company is going and where this product offering is going. Probably could have spent a little more time out on the marketplace and trying to get some additional help, from earlier on than I did.
Sure. Or
so that would be one example.
Sure. Or even just try to drive to an event in a bigger city, or fly to a big conference once or twice a year, right? If you're in a smaller city.
I think I think that would be very helpful. And also just looking at a lot of online research. So there's an amazing amount of information now that's available about how to set up your SaaS company for this or that, or how do you, put together a board? What should you be compensating your CTO? How much shares should you give away? Like all those components, there's so much data available now. It's incredibly valuable to start putting together, your own, not only business model, but how you're structuring the business itself. So I would recommend just make sure you lean on Google as much as possible. It's an incredible asset for starting a business now. I mean, that's what's probably one of the most exciting things is starting a business is cheaper than it's ever been.
Sure.
And it continues to go down in startup costs. We're very capital efficient through the years, and was pretty unheard of. We got to about a 2 million ARR business on less than $200,000 in funding.
Wow.
Which is pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
And a little reason why it took that 5-year overnight success. Sure. But if I think about it, if we raised a lot of money early on, we probably wouldn't be here. because we were waiting for the market to catch up a lot.
Oh,
so you remember that market adoption piece, right? So if I went out and raised, $5 or $10 million back in, 2010, 2011, the market just wasn't there yet.
Interesting.
There wasn't enough adoption of even mobile local search for businesses to want to pay for some solution.
Sure.
So essentially what would have happened is we would have been doing our board meetings and not hitting our revenue numbers, and we would have shut down the business. So
interesting.
That's the one area that, I would also recommend, being a bootstrapper. There's a lot of capital investment now that are looking specifically at bootstrap businesses and recognizing that those CEOs and those those founders essentially went and figured out a business model first.
Yeah, interesting.
And they figured out, how to make some money at this before even building, a full core product, following all the lean startup philosophies and executing on that makes for a pretty lean, mean organization. Sure. And that's where later on you can raise additional capital and give away much less of your company.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done here at Chatmeter.
Interesting. No, I think that's actually quite fascinating. And that's actually really good advice, because I think so many people nowadays figure they need to raise, millions of dollars to launch. And it just seems crazy to me in a lot of situations and cases, unless you're building something, I don't know, like a medical device or you need drug testing or something like that, right? That's just capital intensive, right? But the fact that you can build an entire SaaS business for not a lot of money is really good advice.
Yeah.
So we're kind of at the end of the show. So let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and Chatmeter.
Sure. There is a lot of information about me online. I have a bunch of interviews on there. If you Google my name and Chatmeter, I think I have some pretty cool videos going on over the years. But you can also reach out to me directly if you want to. I'll just leave my email, which is collin@chatmeter.com, COLLIN. I can't say I will get back to you immediately. My inbox is pretty flooded most of the time, but I would try to get back to you. And of course, you can learn anything about Chatmeter at our website, which is just chatmeter.com.
Perfect, Collin. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Okay, great. It's been a pleasure. And again, if you need anything, feel free to reach out.
Will do. Thanks, man. Okay, bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.